The Prime Minister's questioning whether parts of the road on State Highway 1 damaged in Monday's quake are in the right place, as they are very susceptible to slips. Actually, people have been saying this for a long time. We'll talk more about this later, but here's a 2010 Civil Defence report saying precisely the same thing. Parts of the highway between Seddon and Cheviot sustained major damage after the 7.6 earthquake, with several slips and huge amounts of rubble covering parts of the road. As well as the road itself, there is damage to 14 kilometres of the rail line and 7 bridges. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
John Key was able to see the extent of the damage for himself yesterday during a flyover in an Air Force helicopter. He says that's made him question whether parts of the road are in the best place.
In rebuilding the road, which of itself is a very big job, is it absolutely in the right place? Is rail in the right place? And how susceptible is it to a future earthquake or slip? Now I'm not saying there will be dramatic realignment, but it wouldn't be the first time they've gone away just to ask themselves a question when they're having to rebuild a very large piece of road and rail. Is it absolutely positioned in the right place?
He says the Transport Agency will have to consider that as it plans the repair job.
Because these roads were built a long time ago when both the knowledge we had and the capacity we had was different. But you can see from those slips, and if you just go back and look at the Manawatu Gorge, how big a job that was.
The Labour leader Andrew Little, who accompanied Mr Key in the helicopter, questions whether that stretch of road will ever be stable.
Seeing the damage and seeing the cliff faces that will have to be engineered so that they are more stable than they are at the moment, knowing that this is a country clearly prone to earthquakes, I simply raise the question, does it make sense to put a whole heap of resources in reinstating a road and rail link that may well continue to be prone to these sorts of slips and collapses again, or do we look at an alternative?
The Transport Minister Simon Bridges says when the road is repaired it will have to become more resilient.
There is scope for improvement here. We don't want to do this just as an emergency job. We also want to make sure we're doing the best job we possibly can, and if to some extent that means some realignment, we will do that. We're not thinking about taking these up and moving them to, inland or somewhere very different.
The Finance Minister Bill English says it's too early to put a number on the repair bill, but agrees with Mr Key's assessment it will run into the billions. Mr English says the biggest economic impact will be the damaged transport links on the main arterial route from the north to the South Island.
Dealing with large landslips, dealing with issues like Picton and Wellington Port, both having significant issues around damage and disruption. These things are all a pretty hard fix.
And the irony escaped no one when an aftershock hit while Mr English was answering a question in Parliament.
The shorter term steps have been outlined by the Prime Minister and the Minister in charge of earthquakes. It's working. So we know that repairing roads and other utilities are costly and long-term solutions, which is likely to have an impact on government expenditure and will have some impact on tax revenue.
How well placed is New Zealand to deal with the consequences of the earthquake?
Well, Mr Speaker, this time I'll be more careful what I say.
Meanwhile, Mr English says while the EQC's coffers were depleted after the Christchurch earthquakes, the Commission has a government guarantee, so will be able to respond to any claims from this week's event. He says the government is looking at possible changes to the levy system, but has not yet settled on any one specific option. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.